Hello and a very warm welcome to the AIBs 2020. Every one of us has had to adapt to unprecedented challenges this year. Our personal and our work lives have been turned pretty much upside down. Amongst all this, it's the view of the Association for International Broadcasting that, despite these extraordinary times, the work of journalists and factual programme makers deserve to be recognised and rewarded, perhaps more than ever before. After we published our call for entries back in April, we were privileged to receive an incredibly wide range of work across television, radio and digital. They came from organisations around the world. In fact, work from almost 50 countries is represented this year. Thank you to everyone who's entered the AIBs and for trusting us with your work and to allow us to showcase it to the world. The judging is complete, so we haven't got long to find out who's won. Good luck to everyone. Now, if you've followed the AIBs for the last 16 years, you'll know that each November we've held our awards gala in London. It attracts guests from all over the world who come to meet colleagues, exchange ideas, and of course to find out who's won an award. At the start of this year, before the pandemic took hold, we made the decision to move to a brand new location. And that venue is right here, by the House of Commons and Westminster Abbey. It couldn't be more central. And although we can't use it properly this year, we thought we should have a look at what might have been. This is the Assembly Hall at Church House, Westminster, and in normal circumstances, this is where we would have been celebrating your work this evening. Now, it's a wonderful space, as you can see, and it gives us greater flexibility than we've had in the past to accommodate more guests and to do more exciting things as we help to showcase the work of journalists and factual programme makers around the world. With me is Robin Parker, who is General Manager of Church House, Westminster. Tell us a bit about the history of the place.
Well, I mean, the room we're standing in now, the Assembly Hall, is actually still used for its original purpose. It was built to hold the General Synod, which is the Church's Parliament. And if you look around, we have voting doors, and each door has aye or a no over it. And that's the reason we have that number of doors around the room. The General Synod meets a maximum of 2 weeks a year. The building was built in the 1930s. It took them up until 1990 to twig that they could do something else with the other 50 weeks a year. And that's when the conference centre was originally created.
You're expanding the stuff you do for television. I understand that today a new special line is going in between here and the BT Tower.
Indeed, we're having an OB line put in today, which will enable us to live broadcast. It's particularly been put in for an upcoming sporting event, which will be broadcast live on BT television.
Well, we're looking forward to being here with a crowd of people and celebrating properly.
Absolutely. I tell you, our team are desperate to get back into operating events and entertaining people.
Robin Parker, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
So we come to this year's composition. You're going to be pleased to know, I hope, that the way we're celebrating the work of all our finalists is reassuringly unchanged. Traditionally, we've split the awards into two parts, separated by a dinner. And this year, we also have two parts. We've got today's edition, and one we'll be releasing on Monday, the 16th of November. Like every year, we're going to be showing clips from all the journalism and all the productions that have made it through to the shortlist. And then we're going to be announcing any commendations and the winners in every category. We've produced the usual guide to the event, which you can download at the AIBs.tv. It's got details of all the categories and information about all the finalists, so it's a useful guide to have to hand as the shows progress. Let me hand over to our presenter today, Kim Vinnell.
Thank you so much for that, Simon. And let me add my own very warm welcome to this year's AIBs. I really am delighted to be hosting this celebration of journalism and factual. Now, Simon has said this year's events have to put it mildly, reinforce the overriding need for reliable, impartial journalism. As journalists, we've had to counter false narratives, conspiracy theories, and attacks on our colleagues around the world. It's a complex world, and it's our duty to explain it to our viewers and to our listeners. And this program is all about showcasing the best work across news and Factual, which is doing just that. And even with a pandemic, broadcasters and producers, large and small, entered more than 400 hours of content into this year's AIBs. And personally, when I saw the list of broadcasters and production companies that made it to the shortlist, I was astonished. This is such an international contest. And the panel of judges is equally international. Experts from Africa, Europe, North America, and Asia. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of the judges for so generously giving us your time to look at and to listen to all of the shortlisted work. Now, before we get started, we need to thank our event partner, Al Jazeera Media Network. Here's Abdullah Al-Najjar, Executive Director of Global Brand and Communications.
Al Jazeera Media Network is very pleased once again to be the event partner for the AIB. These awards are important for international journalism as they recognize the world's best news coverage and the best factual programs at a time when journalists, editors, producers, and organizations are under threat. Our organizations, journalists, and media makers are facing an unprecedented level and range of challenges. Increasingly, our output is being called into question with attempts to intimidate or to silence those who work for us. In the face of these difficult circumstances, these awards recognize, encourage, and reward those filmmakers and institutions that are dedicated to bringing the truth to people across the globe. At Al Jazeera Media Network, we want to send out a very strong message that journalism is central to and vital for everyone's life. Al Jazeera is proud to support the AIBs and the journalism that these awards showcase.
Thanks for that, Abdullah. Now, even though there's no live studio audience here today, I can hear you all champing at the bit to find out who's won. So let me explain what's going to happen in our show today and in the second edition. As Simon said, the 2020 AIBs are reassuringly unchanged. We'll hear and see extracts of every shortlisted entry, and then I'll announce the winners. At the end of this edition, we'll have the traditional In Conversation with Syrian filmmaker Waad al-Kateab talking to Simon back in Westminster. You can follow the program in the AIBs booklet, which can be downloaded at the AIBs.tv. Okay, so now let's get going with the 2020 AIBs.
Extraordinary rainforests cover much of the remote Indonesian province of West Papua. But the rainforests are the target of global companies who are making hundreds of millions of dollars buying up swathes of pristine forest for just a few dollars, selling out West Papua.
This company, called PTBIA, bought the forest for $5 a hectare, with an estimated total land sale of $200,000. While Linus's tribe got nothing, leaked documents show that the company expected to make more than $1 billion from the timber and plantation. A few months after the deal, Korean giant POSCO International bought PTBIA, retaining its owners as local managers.
Saya pegawai negeri, kenapa saya bertahan untuk membelah tanah? Karena tanah saya tidak diperjualbelikan lagi. Saya harap tanah adat kami dikembalikan.
Our supposedly ethically sourced coffee comes at a price, and it's not the one we pay at the till. Young children work long hours in grueling conditions to quench our thirst. Starbucks and Nespresso, the truth about your coffee.
We've visited a few farms and we've seen young people working. Is that normal?
La certificación prohíbe menores de edad, pero andando los papás con los niños sí los protege para que anden con ellos.
And what age are they allowed to work?
Yo le digo, hay edades donde ya pueden empezar a trabajar, 10, 12.
And even on certified farms, as long as their dad's with them?
Correct.
The cooperative also told us that they are given advance warning of any visits made by Nespresso and Starbucks.
Hong Kong on edge gained unprecedented access to influential figures on both sides of the clashes to help audiences make sense of the financial and economic fallout.
It's not a shred of evidence that the foreign country is mobilizing this demonstration or resistance. All lies.
You've been called a U.S. stooge as well, a traitor to the Chinese nation. Are you a traitor?
Well, I consider all these names a badge of honor.
I have been always honest and sincere about the promises that were given to us, and I want to hold them to it. I said, look, you promised us democracy. It's written to the basic law, and they call me a traitor.
Some people have been forced to call the Zatari refugee camp home for more than 7 years. Jafar Talk spent a week in the camp listening to residents. The aim? To understand and to give a voice to refugees.
الأطفال بعمر بعمر 12 سنة 11 سنة اجوا مذكرين شوي، أما بعمر 6 سنين ما راح يفهموا عليك شو يعني حرب، شو يعني أمن، شو يعني أمان، ما راح يفهموا عليك. بس من خلال حديث اخواتهم انه احنا اجينا وهي كان في ضرب وكان في طيارات، فممكن انهم يتخيلوا بس مو مثل اللي عاشوا يمكن.
ولانه المخيم شو بيعني لهم؟
بيتهم اكيد، بيتهم الاول، هم انخلقوا هون، يعتبروا انهم انخلقوا هون. اذا طلعوا لبرا رح يستغربوا الوضع او رح يشوفوا شيء جديد اصلا، ما رح يكون ببالهم انه في بيوت مثلا، في غرف، ما رح يخطر لهم هذا الشيء لانه ما شافوه اصلا.
Over the past 2 years, Lebanon has witnessed an economic disaster. What caused the collapse of the Lebanese economy?
إذا كانوا عم يعتبروا إنه حاكم مصرف لبنان أخطأ في سياساته، لماذا لم يعترض أحد على هذه السياسات؟ سؤال يطرح ما عندي جواب عليه.
الجواب مضمونه المصالح المتشابكة داخل النظام اللبناني، والبنوك مرآة لهذا النظام من حيث التقسيم الطائفي، فغالبيتها تابعة لجهات سياسية ومقربين منها. الأمر الذي أدى إلى انعدام الرقابة على عمليات إدخال أموال حزب الله المهربة أو غير الشرعية إلى هذه البنوك، مما يعني عمليات تبييض وشرعنة لهذه الأموال.
The end of Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir's rule created hope among the people. But do the backdoor dealings of Sudanese politics mean the longed-for freedoms and prospect of a better future won't happen? Power struggle in Sudan.
هنالك أحزاب كثيفة جدا في قوى الحرية والتغيير لا تثق في الشارع السوداني، ولذلك الآن يريدون خلط الأوراق حتى لا تحدث انتخابات. كل الزوبعة التي تسمعينها الآن هي حتى تحدث خلخلة ولا يذهب الناس إلى الانتخابات. هم يعولون على فترة انتقالية دائمة.
Joko Widodo is the president of Indonesia, a nation of more than 260 million people. As he entered his second term of office, he talked to CNN's Anna Corin about the challenges facing the country.
I learned a lot from our people, not only in the villages, but in the market, in the riverbank, in the city also. I was born in the slum area, near to the river, and the condition of the sanitation, the water is very bad. So I think for me it's good experience.
Incredible work, a great variety of stories in the politics and business category. The judges were particularly impressed with 2 entries that they asked to be noted with commendations. Al Hura Television for its investigation into the collapse of the Lebanese economy, and the 101 East Strand on Al Jazeera English for selling out West Papua. And the winner for what the judges noted was thorough research, tenacity and standout access is Perfect Storm Productions for Starbucks and Nespresso, The Truth About Your Coffee, made for the UK's Channel 4. Catherine Haywood is one of the producers of the programme. Catherine, how did you go about finding these rogue coffee plantations that are employing children?
Well, the coffee growing areas in Guatemala are vast and mountainous, and it's an intricate network of tiny little farms that grow coffee that are not demarcated by fences or anything. So pinpointing the exact areas that were making coffee for Starbucks and Nespresso was really difficult. We managed to get a breakthrough bit of information that honed us in on a particular area. And then we had to just go to that area and ingratiate ourselves with coffee producers who would take us to the particular farms that produced coffee for Starbucks and Nespresso.
And Mickey Mistrati is the executive producer. Mickey, this kind of expose can't be ignored. How did the coffee companies react to the programme's findings?
George Clooney, who is ambassador for Nespresso, he went out in public just after the program was out and was very disappointed on behalf of Nespresso that they were using illegal child labor in the production of Nespresso coffee. That was huge for us, and it went out in more than 50 countries. Secondly, Nespresso did an investigation into all the plantation, and they did find more incidents of illegal child labor, which actually surprised me after our big investigation.
The storming by protesters of the Legislative Council building on the anniversary of Hong Kong's return to Chinese sovereignty was captured live by CNN.
This is ongoing now for hours. One of the main questions that I have is, this normally would be a pretty secure area in any developed country. This is the Parliament building here in Hong Kong. Police have either made a calculated decision or it's just worked out this way, and we're not sure which yet, to let these protesters occupy this space. How long that is going to continue, and let's pan that way, how long that is going to continue, where the police try and allow these protesters to try and break into this building, we're not sure, but that's what we're going to be waiting for here over the next few hours.
RTHK reported on the storming of Hong Kong's barricaded universities by the police, asking whether appropriate force was used.
實質係一個戰場嚟嘅。黃醫生話，有唔少學生被打穿頭同骨折，需要送院醫治。佢就主要處理被燒傷嘅學生。
佢哋俾嗰啲催淚彈直接中咗啊！啲褲係黐實晒。但係當我哋洗嗰個傷口嘅時候咧，其實你知佢係痛到震晒嘅。咁但係佢係唔會出聲咯，好堅強啊！真係。但係即係佢哋係咯。
As Australia's devastating bushfire emergency reached its climax in early January, BBC World News embarked on extensive coverage from the worst-hit state of New South Wales.
I am here at a wedding venue. 900 couples have got married here. Every single weekend this year had been booked out with people coming here to experience the natural beauty and to get married. And when they would arrive, they would come here to the main reception area, and you can see here as well some of the facilities. And then in the bush there would be places for people to go camping and glamping. There were cabins as well, and now it's just a singed remains.
3 minutes after taking off from Tehran airport, Ukrainian Airlines Flight 752 was brought down by a missile. BBC Persian broke the story.
میدونید که ایران کشور سختگیریه و نگران بودیم که بازرس‌هامون رو بیرون کنند.
یعنی شما فکر می‌کنید بر اساس شواهدی که بازرس‌های شما داشتن جمع می‌کردن ایران موضعش رو عوض کرد؟
فکر کنم ایران فهمید که هیچ گزینه دیگه‌ای نداره. همه عکس‌ها و فیلم‌هایی را که لازم داشتیم. حتی اگه تلاش می‌کردن مانع ما بشن، شواهد کافی داشتیم که به جامعه جهانی نشون بدیم که واقعاً چی شده.
خانواده کشته شدگان پرواز اوکراین هنوز در شوک از دست دادن عزیزانشان هستند و سوگوار. هنوز خواهان روشن شدن ابعاد این فاجعه و اطلاع رسانی شفاف از سوی مسئولان حکومتی. دکتر علیرضا قنچی یکی از آنهاست.
در واقع من تو لحظات داشتم می‌دیدم که کل خانواده من در یک نقطه نورانی که هواپیمایی است که داره پرواز می‌کنه دارن به سمت مرگ میرند.
Al Jazeera English reported from countries worldwide as they attempted to get a grip on the coronavirus pandemic.
In the fight against the virus, Senegal is deploying bulldozers. This informal market was where people came for food, clothes, or a cup of tea, destroyed in a matter of minutes by a government which wants people to stop gathering in public spaces. Vendors retrieve what they can before the market is disinfected. The chemicals used are meant to protect them, they're told. Protect them from what, wonders street vendor Dion Nasser? More threatening than the virus is the uncertainty ahead, he says.
It's very dangerous. You know, people are out selling, you know, doing their activities because they cannot stay at home. Because when they stay at home, they cannot actually feed themselves.
The effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine as a potential life-saving treatment for coronavirus patients was the subject of intense debate, as RT France reported.
Ce à quoi le Haut Conseil de la Santé publique avait répondu en recommandant de ne pas utiliser l'hydroxychloroquine dans le traitement contre le Covid-19. Alors qu'on pouvait penser le débat clos, coup de théâtre ce mardi avec la publication de ce communiqué sur le site de The Lancet.
Nous publions une expression d'inquiétude pour alerter les lecteurs sur le fait que de sérieuses questions scientifiques ont été portées à notre attention. Nous mettrons cet avis à jour dès que nous aurons de plus amples informations.
In the UK, it was care homes that bore the brunt of the early stages of the pandemic, as ITV News discovered.
Your goal is to provide the best care possible. And
It's all right, Anita. I know, it's been a rough few weeks.
the thought that all of that could be for nothing and it all gets taken away. And that's hard. Really hard.
Big stories that we all remember, some only too well. Our judges were impressed with all of the entries, and especially BBC World News for its coverage of the Australian bushfires, which they awarded a commendation for coverage with diverse angles and perspectives. The winner in this category for investigative depth, exceptional photography, and passionate correspondence who kept the audience gripped. CNN for Hong Kong protests. Roger Clark is at CNN in Hong Kong. Roger, congratulations to you and the team. Tell me, how did you go about planning coverage of what was such a highly fluid, often dangerous story?
Thank you. Well, crucial to our ongoing coverage of the protests was planning. Before all the protests, a small group of senior editorial staff would huddle and decide which protests we'd cover, how many teams were needed, and where we'd deploy them. We used local producers with every team to help fix and translate on the ground, and these folks did such an important job, as did our engineers who worked incredibly hard to ensure that our transmission systems worked effectively. Safety, of course, was of paramount importance. We deployed safety specialists with our teams along with protective kit. Also crucial was the debrief. After every big deployment, we reviewed what we did, what worked and what didn't, and that enabled us to get stronger as every week went on.
It can, as we all know, be really challenging to find the right balance, especially in a story like this. What sort of steps did you take to avoid becoming a mouthpiece for one side or for the other?
Making sure we stayed fair and balanced in our coverage was extremely important. Senior editorial carefully monitored our coverage on television and online, and if we felt we needed to make a slight course correction, then we would. But to be honest, providing balanced coverage is what CNN does all the time, so it wasn't all that difficult for us, and I certainly didn't feel under any pressure from one side or the other to report things in a certain way. We called it as we saw it, without fear or favour, and we held both sides to account. The key thing is to be accurate, so no matter how much one side or the other did like or didn't like what we said, we had to be accurate. And if we made a mistake, we apologised, corrected it, and moved on.
In northern Burma, hundreds of young ethnic Rakhine women are training to fight in the rebel Arakan army. They are preparing to join the latest and bloodiest of the armed struggles in the country, as Radio Free Asia discovered.
အမျိုးသမီးတွေပါဝင်ရေးဟာအရေးကြီးရမှန်ပေမဲ့ဒီမိုကရေစီလူ့အဖွဲ့အစည်းကိုထူထောင်ရမှာတော့နိုင်ငံရေးအရာအမျိုးသမီးတွေကိုဘလောက်နေရာပေးတယ်လဲဆိုတဲ့အပေါ်မှာမူတည်ပြီးဘလောက်အောင်မြင်မှုရှိမရှိဆုံးဖြတ်ရတာဖြစ်တယ်လို့ဆရာမမီဆူပွင့်ကပြောပါတယ်။
တော့တက်ထဲမှာအမျိုးသမီးတွေခေါ်ထဲတက်မတော်ကလည်းဒီနေ့ခေါ်ထဲတာပဲတက်မှုတွေ level မှာအရာရှိအဆင့်တွေအထိအောက်ခြေတပ်ဖွဲ့ဝင်တွေကအစားအမျိုးသမီးတွေကိုအများကြီးခေါ်လာတယ်လေ့ကျင့်ပေးလာတယ်မိုးလောင်းတင်တန်းတွေမှာခေါ်လာတယ်နော်သူတို့ရဲ့ဟိုတက်မတော်နေတို့လိုမျိုးအခမ်းအနားတွေမှာ
As the protests in Hong Kong continued to grow in number and ferocity, travellers arriving in the city became first-hand witnesses, as Bloomberg News reported.
Take a look at that right now. You can see they've used trolleys to try to block these entrances, these roadways into the departure hall here. They were quick to move. That's why we saw so much commotion at the get-go here, because we've seen them do this in the past. They've used barricades. They've used things to try to block. There you see the riot police right now. They are getting off the cars and seeing they're going to try to make it back into the departure hall at this moment. We have not seen any police presence here in the last 5 days.
Yemen is in its 6th year of war. Taiz, its cultural capital, has been torn in two. BBC News reported from this city of snipers.
One street, one lane is safe, the other is not. That's the nature of this shifting front line in Taiz, dividing streets, dividing homes, shattering lives.
This side of the wall in government hands. The other, Houthi fighters. Both sides shooting. The face of the front line drained of life. Other streets shot through with danger.
It's time to go, they say. It's not good to stay here long. It's just not safe.
The epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, Wuhan, was declared off-limits to international news crews. CNN managed to report from the city just before it went into lockdown.
So this is where authorities believe the source of the coronavirus is. It's the wildlife and seafood market. And you can perhaps see over there, it's cordoned off. You've got police at all the corners.
It is so sensitive that within minutes of us arriving and recording, security asked us to stop filming.
So police just asked us to leave the market area. They said we have to get official permission, and once we get that permission, we can come back. The reality is we won't be granted that permission. So instead, we're able to drive now through it, but you can see they've closed off the entire market area. No shopping is going on, no business whatsoever. It's just empty.
While humans have been battling the pandemic, wildlife in many parts of the world has flourished. The Gulf state of Qatar is one example. Al Jazeera English.
There are hardly any boats on the water anymore, and it's having an impact.
Have you observed a change in nature due to corona and less people on the water, less people out?
Definitely, sure. Not just in everywhere. Even the vision. You can see a clear sky everywhere. The water become more clear, more fish coming close to the area. And that's tell us one thing, where is the human, where is the disaster?
Brazil's President Bolsonaro referred to coronavirus as a little flu. People in Manaus took a different view as they buried hundreds of pandemic victims every day, as CNN discovered.
This month, they buried 103 in one day, digging at night. Even in 2 hours, 5 come. One by one, laid in the trench. Many mourners say theirs aren't coronavirus deaths, but it's hard to know here.
The official numbers in Brazil don't tell the whole picture, partly because there isn't enough testing. You can see that here. These are those who've died and have tested positive for coronavirus, but these graves, staggeringly, well, they're the ones that they suspect may have died of the disease.
More remarkable journalism, bringing important stories from around the world to our screens. Once again, our judges faced challenging decisions. 2 entries received commendations for nuanced reporting and authenticity, fear and anxiety in the epicenter of the Wuhan coronavirus outbreak, CNN. And for the refreshing angle of a story overlooked by other news outlets, the life of female fighters in Myanmar's Arakan Army by Radio Free Asia. And the winner in this category for what the judges said was real frontline reporting from a war zone that offered insight, impact and emotional appeal is Yemen, inside a dangerously divided city of snipers from BBC World News. The team that worked on this story is currently in Kabul, and Dave Bull is the shoot edit producer. Dave, Yemen is one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a journalist right now. How did you and your crew go about telling the story of the people of Taiz?
Taiz for me was different because it was very difficult for me to be able to get the shots, for the team to be able to get the footage we needed to tell the story of Taiz, as the local minders were making it fairly difficult for us to get to the locations we wanted to. One example of this, trying to get down to the front line, a huge argument blew up between our local producer and the local minders, which meant they actually abandoned us, which was a blessing in disguise because it gave us 20 minutes to rush down there, get as close as we could in order to be able to tell the story of what the locals were going through down at that flashpoint.
And for Chief International Correspondent Lise Doucette, Yemen continues to be a living hell for most of its citizens. Obviously, reporting like yours helps to keep it in the headlines, but what hope do you feel that there is for the people there?
Well, the image most people have of Yemen, I think, is of starving babies. It's such an important story. But we wanted to tell another story, one of educated, cultured Yemenis not waiting for the outside world and to give them help. So we went to Taiz, a divided city, which has been very much become a symbol of this terrible conflict, where Yemenis there feel that they're suffering the abuses and attacks from all sides. But Taiz is known among Yemenis as their capital of culture. It's educated more doctors, teachers, professionals from all walks of life than anywhere else in Yemen. And so we found a city where Yemenis and civil society, including women's groups, were doing what they can to ease the suffering in this city, to try to end the blockade which is strangling people's lives. And we found people too who feel so forgotten by their leaders and by our leaders too.
Indeed, that sadly is the case. Lise Doucette and Dave Bull, congratulations on telling the story and thank you for joining us.
In October last year, global business, government and public health leaders gathered in Manhattan for an exercise simulating response to a hypothetical pandemic. Bloomberg Radio covered the simulation that would have real-life implications within weeks.
We have to be prepared for all pandemics, and the possibility of a rapidly moving airborne pandemic is one that we really particularly have to get ready for, because it'll probably be in several countries before we even know it.
Chris Elias heads global development for the Gates Foundation, which is hosting this event with the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and the World Economic Forum.
I met Bill Gates not long ago, and he described this before the New England Journal of Medicine as one of his worst nightmares.
What could kill 10 million people today? You know, nuclear war, an asteroid, and a pandemic.
It could happen again because it's happened before. The bubonic plague killed up to 200 million people, sweeping through Europe in 1346. Pandemics aren't limited to the Middle Ages.
Hong Kong has been less badly affected by the pandemic than other countries. But at the height of the pandemic, Hong Kongers were nevertheless worried, as RTHK reported.
多謝林鄭啦，搞到香港人可以咁樣，我從來冇諗過，我成世都冇諗過我要瞓街排口罩。
一罩難求，但當時行政長官林鄭月娥話：唔係所有場合都要戴口罩。
平時嘅官員呢，如果唔符合嗰幾個嘅要求呢，就唔準戴。我根本係叫你唔準戴，戴咗都要即係除翻落嚟啦。
特首翌日就言論道歉，走上抗疫前線嘅律敦治醫院。
On February 24, the pandemic went global. Bloomberg Radio covered the spread, the government response and the economic fallout, with reports from its bureaus around the world.
We get the latest on the situation there from Bloomberg's Alessandro Speciale in Rome.
It hasn't yet been cleared why and how the virus arrived in Italy. What is sure is that for days, a person in the north of Italy was in hospital and he wasn't diagnosed with coronavirus, and this has helped spread to hundreds of people. The latest count is 152. Italy had stopped all flights to China, which surprisingly meant that people coming back from China couldn't be traced as coming from China because they were coming via other cities, and this probably has also helped the spread.
They planted strawberries, but harvested coronavirus. This is how some have bitterly described the surge of cases among female strawberry pickers in Morocco, as BBC Arabic discovered.
في حقول الفراولة بشمالي المغرب
حقول بات بعضها بؤرة لتفشي وباء كورونا، وهو ما قد يعود لما تراه نوال افتقارها وزميلاتها في العمل لأي مستلزمات للوقاية من الفيروس.
ونفيق الصباح بكير على الساعة 4 صباحا ونروح إلى الشغل، والشغل كم ساعة؟ نشغل 10 ساعات أو 11 ساعة. لا يوجد كمامات ولا يوجد تعقيم ولا يوجد أي حاجة لنحمي نفسنا من الكورونا.
All India Radio followed the story of a family of 9 in Udaipur, of whom 4 turned out to be COVID-19 positive.
झीलों की नगरी में ऐसी ही एक सुबह खबर लाई शहर के पहले कोविड-19 पॉजिटिव इंसान की। भीतरी शहर की तंग गलियों में रहने वाला एक किशोर अच्छा खासा इंदौर से लौटा था और जब जांच हुई तो वो और उसके साथ उदयपुर शहर भी हो गया कोरोना पॉजिटिव। ये किशोर घबराया जरूर, लेकिन उसने इस वायरस से मुकाबले की ठानी।
पहले तो डर ही लगा था, घबराहट हुई थी, फिर बाद में तो बस ये बीमारी से अब जितना डर गए हैं, डरने की तो कोई बात नहीं है, बस बात यही है कि बस उसको सामना करो, इम्यूनिटी अपनी बना।
On June 20th, President Trump held his first rally for 3 months in Tulsa. The big election rally had been shifted back from June 19th, known in the States as Juneteenth, the day celebrating the end of slavery. BBC News reported.
Part of the racial violence is aimed at suppressing and oppressing black folks, socially, politically, and economically. I think in 2 words, I would say white supremacy. I mean, that's a conversation we're having today in the United States. It's a conversation that we should have had decades and centuries ago.
Greenwood has never recovered from the massacre, according to Caleb Gale. In one sense, the whole of the USA has never recovered from what lay behind it.
Even today, in Tulsa, in one of the major zip codes in Black Wall Street, the average life expectancy is 9 years less than the rest of the county.
Well, as those entries prove, radio remains a powerful medium for journalism. Judges commended 2 finalists. First, for dynamic reporting with differing voices that build a global picture. The coronavirus outbreak spreads outside China by Bloomberg Radio. And for coherent narrative and strong editorial concept, Battle Hymn of Angels and White and Hong Kongers by RTHK. The winner of the Radio and Audio News Reporting Award for balanced and coherent work with breadth, depth, boldness, originality and impact is Trump's Tulsa rally and a massacre in 1921 from World at One, BBC Radio 4. Mark Mardell was a reporter on the story. Mark, what were the challenges in talking about Tulsa's history with the people who call it home at such an emotive time?
We obviously approached people with care and empathy, but found most people were actually eager to tell the story of their city, something that had been seared on their soul for all their lives, but they often felt was kept a secret from the rest of the world. And we felt that they wanted to tell the story and found it so. Not just the story of the massacre itself, but the story of the white backlash against black prosperity.
And what was the mood like in the city on the eve of the Trump rally?
Well, it's one of the challenges of reporting in a pandemic that you can't physically be there, but we spoke to lots of people, and whilst some obviously were excited about the rally that was going to take place, most people felt a sense of, I'm not sure whether it's anger, more indignation that Trump would come here, either in ignorance of the city's history or deliberately blowing a dog whistle. But actually more than that, probably stronger than that, was just fear that he'd be spreading the pandemic itself.
In the 2018 wildfires in California, 90% of the town of Paradise was destroyed. Today, there are glimmers of hope, VOA discovers.
But you still have the loss like everybody else does. You know, I mean, we lost 4 houses and our business and a lot of tools and stuff like that. So we're in a rebuilding process as well. This is business for me, you know, but it's also a rebuilding process for me and for the people. Our friends that called and said, put me on your list, I want you to build me a house. That, you know, made us want to stay. And we just thought, well, since we'd lost so many contractors in town, and this is what I've done my whole life, I really felt like, me personally, I would be copping out on my own friends and some of my own, you know, town members and stuff like that if I didn't stay and rebuild.
51 died and dozens were injured in the Christchurch massacre last year. Al Jazeera Arabic tells the story of some of the survivors. New Zealand, after the massacre.
Wassim is now relying on donations to support his family.
Ellen and Wassim, $200. This card, $660.
But there's also some good news.
Last Monday or the Monday before, my daughter have a major surgery because her stomach will refuse to close. And it's been a week now, and the wound looks fantastic.
Finally, we are going home. That's the bag. Everybody excited? I am very excited to come back home.
Iran's Mahan Air brought the first confirmed coronavirus cases to Iraq and Lebanon and circumvented flight bans, spreading the virus across the Middle East. BBC News Arabic investigated.
The airline and its crew weren't only flying to and from China, it was also flying to Lebanon, Syria and Iraq from Iran. All countries with strong military, economic and religious ties to the powerful Iranian Revolutionary Guard. There was widespread alarm across the region about the continuation of these flights.
شكرا إيران، شكرا لأنك سمحت لطائرة فيها مصابون بالكورونا أن تدخل أجواءنا.
خطر الإصابة بهذا الفيروس لا سامح الله بالعراق أصبح وشيكا.
في حزب فتح حسابه مطار بيروت كرمال إيران، ليش؟ ما عم بفهم، أي متى بده يكون أهم شيء بالنسبة لك الشعب اللبناني.
The UK's largest deployment of military peacekeepers in 2 decades is in South Sudan. Simon Thornton of BFBS travelled to the country to explore the role of the British forces there.
Women in these camps face a threat of sexual violence, so UK personnel upgraded 16 kilometres of roads so they can safely travel to collect food and water. And in a building on the edge of the site in Malakal, they even put on self-defence classes, along with training on women's rights. Just down the road, on the White Nile, another project helped fishermen from nearby villages build floating jetties, so that they have easy access to their boats.
Filmmaker Raul Gallego Abayan took audiences to the front line of coronavirus treatment in his native Barcelona in March. The Virus, for Al Jazeera Digital.
I dream a lot that I don't have the protective equipment to put on, so that I don't have the right mask or I don't have the right, the right gown, and that the patient is coming in and I cannot go in because I don't have the protective stuff. So I dream a lot about the alarms on the monitors and that no one is going to the alarms.
Yeah, this is a completely new infection. So we are learning day by day.
And the more we learn is like we understand that what is really dangerous from this virus is the degree of immune discontrol that it generates in some patients. And that's why you have someone who could be perfectly well or even having breakfast in the morning and then become intubated in the evening.
Think your cab driver is safe and qualified? In London, they might not be. The dark secrets of how qualifications are obtained fraudulently were uncovered by Guy Lynn for BBC London.
Amazingly, to get the BTEC, you don't have to do anything.
How it works, you have boys come in, take tests.
No test.
And
so I do the test for you.
Okay.
That's why you're paying £500.
It's okay? I mean,
what do you mean?
Is it safe?
Yeah, of course, man. Normal college, man. If anyone phones you, just have to say you did 3 days course. We've done over 300 students. But don't go telling people.
No, I don't.
Someone does the test for you.
No, I don't know. I just, I want to work a job and,
Well, that makes you think twice about taking a mini cab. Once again, our judges were impressed by the range of short documentaries submitted. They marked out 2 for commendations. For robust journalism that benefited from dry facts being told well, Coronavirus by Air from BBC News Arabic. And for that alarming story about fraudulent cab licences using a simple but effective investigative technique, Cab Fraud by BBC London. The winner in the short documentary category for a bold story very well told alongside great visuals and a strong soundtrack, Fly on the Wall, The Virus by Raul Gallego Abayan for Al Jazeera Digital. Now, Raul, everyone has been touched in some way by the coronavirus, but you went right to the heart of Spain's crisis. How willing to talk were the healthcare workers that you met?
I was pretty shocked to see how the majority of health workers were okay to talk off the record, but they were pretty afraid of talk in front of the camera. There was a lot of pressure from local government, state government, the direction of hospitals to not to talk what was really happening inside of the hospitals. There was a lot of fear to create this state of alarm, and at the same time there was pretty shocking that we are in a full democracy where it's supposed to be freedom of information, but there was a lot of blockage of information. There was at the beginning of the pandemic was really difficult to get access with a camera inside of the hospitals, and that was pretty shocking. It's not supposed to be like this, but healthcare workers were really worried that if they were going to complain on camera, their careers would be affected, they would be punished, they would be fired, or their contracts would not be renewed. So it was pretty shocking to see that we are still in this state where there is not so much actually freedom to explain what was really happening.
Raul, thank you for joining us from Spain.
Harlequin ichthyosis is a rare genetic disorder causing thick and scaly skin. The sufferer's struggles are physical, social and emotional. The skin we wear.
It means I have to take a lot more care than the average person.
So slightly raise your chest up, come back into downward facing dog.
My skin multiplies much faster overnight. I need to take more care of my skin. I need to cream more. I need to hydrate more. And unfortunately, my sweat glands aren't as open as most people, so I can't sweat properly, so I will overheat. You have to be very careful, and you have to take everything day by day.
Across the world, young people are using hidden Instagram groups to share disturbing posts about self-harm, eating disorders and suicide. Secret on Instagram examined the devastating consequences.
Mensen heeft er wel voor gezorgd dat de afgelopen maanden de Instagram-community negatief naar beneden is gegaan. En dat ik veel meer zie hoeveel mensen dat er in het ziekenhuis geraken met zelfverwonding, overdoses. Dus ja, Amber en Hanne zijn niet de enige geweest. En ik vrees dat ook niet bij hen zal blijven als die community nog zo hard blijft voortevalueren.
Men suffering from mental health issues tend not to talk about it or seek help. Mental Health, Breaking the Silence, aimed to get more men to address the stigma.
Not talking about it was definitely one of the factors of me trying to take my life so many times. Now that I see that talking it has such a massive effect on so many people, I wish I'd have done it back then. I always say I wish there was an Andy's Man Club then, because maybe I'd have talked about it and I'd have been better a long time ago rather than waiting 8 years to grieve and then finding out that it's okay to grieve.
If you're transgender in the Middle East, you face many struggles. Word of Truth explored the challenges and looked at how transgender people are treated by their families, communities and governments.
يعني كثير صعبين للقاضي حتى يقبل. واحدة منهم في قرار كثير تعسفي إنه عدم مقدرة الشخص على الإنجاب. يعني الشخص الترانس إن كان ذكر أو أنثى بده يثبت للقاضي إنه ما بيقدر يجيب أولاد يعني، فبالتالي عم بيجبرون إنه يكونوا عقيمين، عم بيجبرون يكونوا إنه ينحرموا من هذه النعمة إن كان بدهم يكونوا آباء أو بدهم يكونوا أمهات أو بدهم يكونوا شو ما كان.
In Africa, women changemakers are blazing a trail for the next generation. Female pilots met two of them.
I wake up doing what I'm passionate about, which is making a difference, making sure that I impart the knowledge, making sure that whatever resources that I have, I get to share. That has also changed my life, because we always go out and we say we want to change people's lives, but sometimes it is our lives that have been changed. I think one of our signature programs is the Girl Fly program in Africa Aviation and Space Camp, where we take about 100 learners from all over Africa. They get to spend 5 days with us, and they get to learn everything has to do with aviation and space technology.
In Serbia, from the late 1960s until the early 2000s, there were many unexplained cases of newborn babies that seemed to simply disappear. Were these children stolen and given away for illegal adoption? Missing babies.
Da je moje dete umrlo. Pitala sam kad moje dete mogu da sahranim, kako to protokol teče, šta da uradim. Rekli su mi da ne možem, da je to briga sve bolnice, da će oni to sve da odrade. Dete mora da ide na obdukciju. Dete će biti kremirano i oni će to da sahrane. Da je to sve zadatak bolnice.
But the documents Radosava got from the hospital don't mention the autopsy results.
Vidim sve da ništa ne odgovara.
At the height of the pandemic, Spanish filmmaker Raúl Gallego Abayan captured a range of highly personal stories of those caught up in the crisis. Fly on the wall, the virus.
Que hemos pasado de fabricar, pero más o menos entre 80, 100, 120 cajas, a poder fabricar todo lo que podamos. 300, 350, 400 cajas diarias.
Like last night at 3 o'clock morning, I cannot close my eyes. It's so hard. You think just in the people dying. You don't think where they are from. This is massacre, slow massacre.
Can a carefully selected group of Belgian citizens tackle the extreme physical and psychological training tests to reach the finishing line? Surviving the Special Forces.
Riet is op 300 meter van de finish en ze heeft nog een dikke 2 minuten. Nog net haalbaar dus. Maar Riet zit erdoor.
Ik zie mezelf eigenlijk niet zo snel opgeven. En ons mama heeft daar wel echt veel schrik voor. Ja. Ja, die heeft gewoon schrik dat ik echt een blijvende blessure daaraan ga overhouden. Ja, omdat ik niet opgeef. Ja.
I was thinking of putting myself forward for that next year, but then again, maybe not. A strong story is covering so many aspects of life. 2 commendations from our judges again. First, for the compassionate treatment of a difficult personal story, The Skin We Wear by CNA Media Corps. And for a moving tale with a strong narrative, Off the Grid, Missing Babies by TRT World. Now, the winner of the human interest category for an important story of our times treated in a compelling and enlightening way. Pano, Secret on Instagram, broadcast on VRT. Sarah van Boxdale is editor-in-chief at VRT. Sarah, how did you go about getting the young people and their families to open up about all the issues around self-harm fueled by social media?
Well, we talked to them a lot. We visited them as well, gaining their trust. And only when we were able to convince them that showing their own pain and vulnerability would help in open up and break the taboo and preventing others to taking the same step towards self-harm and suicide. When they were convinced, we were able to tell the story in the way we wanted it to. And also before we showed the documentary to the broader public, we showed them the first editing before, because we really wanted them to be okay with this story.
What action have the social media platforms taken to shut down this problem in Belgium?
Well, first of all, it appears to be exceptional that they respond to questions from the press. We had 2 off-the-record conversations with the PR and the policy makers of Instagram, and a lot of emails going hands and forth, to which eventually led to an official statement in the report. And in it they recognize the problem and say they're working hard on removing harmful content and to reach out to those who post them, but they depend on artificial intelligence. That should help them with the process. But this depends on third parties reporting content, which unfortunately happens very little. So yes, unfortunately, these type of posts often remain untouched. We receive signs that the community, although itself, is more and more aware of the danger and seems to regulate itself.
Sarah, thank you so much. Now, it's important also to note that VRT worked closely with Norway's NRK on this, and Anne Matt Molland in particular. So a great cross-border collaboration.
The impetus to leave North Korea for a better life remains strong. Radio Free Asia followed a group of 13 of these hopeful defectors.
지금 어디인가?
넘었대요. 네, 확인했어요. 문자 받았어요.
흰 차고 그죠? 깜빡깜빡하셔. 2분 나간다. 2분.
찾았다.
찾았어. 아유 고생 많았습니다. 저하고 통화한 사람 누구예요? 찾아오신 환영합니다.
Martin Perry has spent years coaching sportsmen and women to build confidence and handle the psychological demands of their game. In Writings on the Wall, he delves into the secretive superstitions of leading sports professionals.
If I break that chain, if I break the mould of not touching my left ear or putting my left spike on first, all of a sudden I'm going to give myself almost bad luck. You might have lunch at the same time every day and it's your routine, it feels good for you. You watch the same afternoon programme or you listen to the same radio show every Thursday, whatever it might be. If you enjoy something and it gives you satisfaction or it makes you feel good, then you would continue to do that. And for whatever reason, those sporting rituals just became a part of me and I couldn't break that chain.
Superstitions create stability, they create a point of control. The greater the occasion, the more the need for superstitions, the more the player is going into the unknown.
In Britain, having a stiff upper lip is a well-known national characteristic. In Virtues of Vulnerability, former UK Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls explores the benefits and pitfalls of being honest about ourselves.
If you could go back now to when you had the cancer diagnosis or when you did that first broadcast with your rasping voice, what would you tell yourself now?
Calm down. Accept that you can't control what happens to you. You can control how you react to what happens to you, but you're not in control. I guess the thing I learned is don't be scared about being vulnerable. That sense that I think is very male, isn't it? Which is don't show a chink. Don't let anybody see this, because then they've got you. I don't think that anymore.
Conjoined twins Mariam and Ndé were not given much hope for survival. Their father made a worldwide search for help and eventually found it at London's Great Ormond Street Hospital. The right thing. Inseparable twins.
The two girls were joined together extensively. They had 3 arms and 2 legs between them, and also a shared liver, bladder and digestive system. Their brains, hearts and lungs were separate. As Ibrahima struggled in the delivery room in Senegal to take in the reality of their situation, Dr. Cissé urged Ibrahima, a Sufi Muslim, to draw on his faith, and he did.
He told me to be strong as a Muslim. So if I start collapsing now, where these babies will find strength?
In Queer and Country, BFBS met lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender service men and women to find out about their experiences in Britain's armed forces.
For me, very, very similar story actually. So I was, I was about 4.5, 5, realised I was transgender. This was kind of 1977 in Northern England. A particularly hostile time in a hostile place actually for anybody who is perceived in any way, shape or form to be different. And so it quickly became apparent that I was never going to be able to be myself. Society just wouldn't allow that to happen. So I joined the military fully expecting to serve my whole career without transitioning. But thankfully, I saw a change in the organisation that would then allow a change in myself and allow me to become a better version of myself.
The journey from D-Day to victory in Europe took 11 long months, in which radio played a vital role. VE Day 75, Sound Stories.
Just as it seemed the horrors might be almost over, the BBC's Richard Dimbleby filed an astonishing and horrifying report from a place in Germany called Belsen. It was April the 19th, 1945, when much of Britain and the world heard for the first time what horror really was.
Here, over an acre of ground, lay dead and dying people. You could not see which was which, except perhaps by a convulsive movement or the last quiver of a sigh from a living skeleton too weak to move.
Increasing numbers of people are embarking on pilgrimages. St. Kevin's Way in Ireland is one of a growing number of paths that offer pilgrims a route to resolving inner conflicts and making peace with the modern world. The Pilgrim Paths of Ireland.
So Baveen, we're setting off now on a 26-kilometre pilgrimage, which I know other people would think of as a 26-kilometre walk. So what is a pilgrimage?
Well, for me, a pilgrimage is simply a walk with a sense of presence, with a sense of awareness. Pilgrimage is like a sacred path that people walked, often towards a shrine or towards a place, a sacred place. And the idea is to walk with an intention and with a sense of inner silence and inner awareness, aware of everything that we're walking through.
A rich variety of stories in our Radio Human Interest category. Now we have two commendations from our judges. First, noting the boldness of an entertaining piece where the presenter hits just the right tone, Writings on the Wall by Block Media for BBC Radio 4. And for powerful, brilliantly designed work with an almost cinematic quality, VE Day 75, Sound Stories by BFBS, the Forces Station. And the winner of the Human Interest Radio Award for a top feature with impact that's full of optimism and hope, coupled with clever use of music, is Virtues of Vulnerability with Ed Balls by TBI Media for BBC Radio 4. Congratulations, Ed. Tell us about your formula for getting your subjects to open up about their vulnerabilities.
I think the key to talking to contributors about difficult subjects, things that they feel vulnerable about, is that there has to be trust. They have to trust in the beginning, you're coming with the right motives, genuinely wanting to tell with them their story. They have to believe that you'll give them the time and the space to do so, and often it takes time to really relax people so that they can say what they want to say. And at the end, they have to believe that you care about the story they're telling and that you want to help them tell it in the best way. It's all about trust from beginning to end. That's the key.
What advice do you have for people who want to confront their own really personal challenges, like a stammer?
I did the programme partly motivated by the public struggle I had with my stammer, which undoubtedly, in the end, made me better at all the public performance I do. And I was talking to many people who are successful in their own lives, for whom their vulnerability has actually strengthened them as performers or as individuals. But talking to one brilliant young activist, Scarlett Curtis, for the programme, who's had many challenges with her mental health. She's very public. She shares her experience with so many other young people. When I asked her, it's you, has it made you stronger? She said, if I had my time again, I wouldn't have gone through this. And I think it's naive to always think that vulnerability and talking about it can make you stronger. Sometimes people would rather it just went away.
Over just a few weeks, almost $10 million was stolen in California. $10 million worth of nuts. It was part of an international crime wave affecting the agriculture business, as nut jobs uncovered.
To be honest, my experience with PIs has been that they mostly only exist to track insurance scams and sex pests cheating spouses. Let's just say right now I'm having a lot of preconceptions challenged.
Does it ever strike you as weird that you need a shotgun to defend agriculture?
Not out here. There's a lot of gangs. There's a lot of criminals out in these fields. This is where they do their dirty work. We have burning cars, stolen cars. They strip cars out here. You never know what you're going to find when you turn a corner. We dress like we do and carry what we do because we never know what's around the next corner.
The High Performance podcast offers a glimpse into the lives of high-achieving, world-class performers. How have these people got to the top, and what keeps them there?
It's almost a better feeling than achieving yourself is helping other people to thrive. But it's hard to do that when you're 15, 16.
No, this is a very deep one, because will you get to this stage without being selfish earlier stages?
So you have to be selfish in the beginning to get the success, to then be selfless and pass it on.
I think so. I think so. To actually achieve what you want to achieve, to be able to give back, you have to be selfish.
Daphne Caruana Galizia exposed corruption in her home country of Malta and paid with her life. Her son Paul seeks the truth about who ordered her assassination. My mother's murder.
We went with my father to the European Parliament, and it was one of the first times we had left the house since her assassination. His speech marked the start of a very public, very intense campaign to seek justice for my mother. We want to know who ordered her killing. We want the masterminds. We also want to know the reasons as to why our mother was killed. We want to know who ordered it, who commissioned it, why, everything. Their links to the government, to the Prime Minister. We travelled from country to country.
In the Mental Ideas podcast from RTHK, Sadie Kay explores creative approaches to tackling mental health issues.
Why are so many of our favourite comedians depressed?
Most of the ones that I've met all have this very similar background of feeling like an outcast or an outsider as a child. I've met many, many, many cartoonists and humor writers over the years. Everybody was not only the kid in the back of the class drawing pictures, they were also the last one to be chosen for sports. We didn't draw pictures because we thought, oh, how nice, I'm going to draw pictures and be an artist. No, cartoons and humor was that catharsis, that way of getting back.
The Take from Al Jazeera tackles underreported stories, like Chile's water shortage.
You might be thinking this is climate change. And it is. But this is in a country with swimming pools, lush green lawns, farms full of oranges, grapes for wine, cherries, every kind of produce you can think of. And avocados.
Villagers in Chile are locked in a fight for clean water, claiming farms supplying UK supermarkets are depleting local supplies. That's because avocado farming requires massive water use.
Americans ate over 2 billion pounds of the fruit. That's over 1 billion kilos. And while it might be good for health-conscious eaters, things are not looking so great for those who actually grow it.
Nearly half of all native Hawaiians live outside Hawaii. It's a startling statistic that raises a lot of painful questions about family, identity, and the future of the islands. The Offshore Podcast. Far from home.
Riding my bike around town, going to the beach with my cousins, that sense of community is a part of what I worry about losing. I think about when I'm older, right? And I'm living on Hawaiian homes, and I'm looking at my neighbors. Am I going to know them? Or will they be strangers? A lot of people say that it's too expensive here, but part of me knows that that's not the entire story. What makes you so disconnected from this special place that you feel like you could be okay living anywhere else? And how do you hold on to your culture away from Hawaii?
In 2006, Dublin-born piano player Derek Conlon unwittingly crossed into the murky world of international espionage. He drank from the same radioactive cup used to poison Alexander Litvinenko, polonium, and the piano player.
So when the bus arrived to pick Derek up on Essex Road in 2006, he was on the final leg of a collision course that had actually been years in the making.
It was piddling down, as I say, and I thought, well, here we go, another day at work.
But the journey that led both Derek Conlon and Alexander Litvinenko to the Millennium Hotel that afternoon actually started in the aftermath of a major international crisis. We're going back to 1962, when the world was brought to the brink of nuclear war after the US discovered that the Soviet Union was sending missiles to Cuba.
Castro's government has invasion.
It's kind of worrying just how easily you can get caught up in something so sinister. 2 commendations from our judges here. Firstly, for a bold and creative production that covered a fascinating subject, Nut Jobs by Something Else for Audible Originals. And for the way 2 stories were interwoven, Polonium and the Piano Player from Sky News Storycast. And the winner of the Factual Podcast Award 2020 goes to the painstaking investigative work that was translated into an engaging and moving production, My Mother's Murder from Tortoise Media. Paul Caruana Galizia joins us now from Malta. Paul, congratulations on this award, albeit for a story we all wish did not have to be told. How has the telling of your mother's story impacted you and your family?
So telling my mother's story has introduced my brothers and me to her work and her life in a more complete way. There were things we never knew about her and her work before this podcast, so I think it brought us closer to her. And in telling her story, we have restored, I think, a lot of the humanity that was stolen from her during her life and murder. Among all the campaigning we've done over the past 3 years and continue to do, I think the podcast stands out as one of the most compelling pieces.
Okay, so where is the murder investigation at now?
The current state of the investigation into her murder is complex. The 3 men charged with executing my mother are awaiting a trial by jury. The man charged with commissioning them is going through pre-trial criminal proceedings. More broadly, though, what the criminal proceedings and public inquiry into her assassination have shown so far is a real entangled web of corruption, of violence, and of disinformation that took hold of Malta about 7 years ago, and that we are only just starting to peel back.
Paul, good luck with the investigation and for getting justice for your mother.
5 years ago, Reverend Sharon Risher lost her mother and 2 cousins in a mass shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. In Quiet No More, we follow her as she advocates equality and gun reform.
I don't see where a person would need an AR-15 or a semi-automatic weapon. Not all of us who are survivors have ever been involved in such a public thing. I have yet to get professional counseling. My son is a clinical psychologist and he says, "Ma, when are you gonna stop running?"
Spotlight on the Troubles, A Secret History, retold the story of the bloody 30-year conflict in Northern Ireland on the 50th anniversary of the start of the Troubles.
Bloody Friday provided an admirable excuse to get Motorman in, and Motorman was seen as an ideal vehicle for getting rid of the no-go areas.
The invasion of the Bogside and Cregan estates began in a heavy downpour of rain at 4 a.m.
Under the cover of darkness, 28,000 troops broke down the IRA's no-go areas. It was the biggest military operation of the Troubles.
Child abuse is rife across Afghanistan, in villages, in mosques, in schools and in homes. If the victims speak up, they are blamed, not the attackers. Afghanistan's open secret.
قضیه لوگر برای ما به عنوان یکی از تکان دهنده ترین قضایایی که برای کودک‌ها بوده مطرح است.
The government of Afghanistan has been compelled to confront powerful interests.
ما باید برای اجتماع خود، برای جامعه خود که در حال تحول است، ولو اگر جامعه بسیار سنتی هم باشد، ما باید یک چالش که در اجتماع موجود داره در چارچوب قوانین خود باید رو حل بکنیم.
But in this conservative religious society, people have been victimized or even killed for daring to speak out.
موی سفیدا آمدن و گفتن مرده و زنده و نامنیکی و نامبدید به دست ما.
In Romania, everything seems to be for sale. Human trafficking is rife, and officialdom is often closely linked to criminal activities. The kidnapping of 15-year-old Alexandra Maceșanu brought the issue into sharp relief, in the name of the state.
A dispărut miercuri pe 24 iulie. A sunat la 112 joi, iar polițiștii au intrat în casa celui care a răpit-o abia vineri pe 26. Anchetatorilor le-a luat o zi să găsească locuința lui Gheorghe Dincă și o noapte întreagă ca să se hotărască să intervină. Dimineața, în casa ororilor, au mai găsit doar monstrul, nu și victima lui. O țară întreagă afla că, deși ar fi putut, statul n-a reușit să o salveze. Iar în ziua în care înregistrarea apelului de urgență a devenit publică, am înțeles cu toții primele cauze ale acestui eșec: prostia și mai ales nepăsarea.
During the coronavirus pandemic, London's Arabic-speaking community responded to the crisis in innovative ways. London lockdown.
قالوا لا نحن بنكون موجودين، بنيجي بنقعد بنعمل فولنتير، بنطبخ بنوزع للناس، لانه احنا اصلا نحن بفلسطين عايشين هذا الوضع من زمان، ف يعني صار في خبره متراكمه، يعني وضع الحرب موجود اوريدي، فعملنا سويتش مباشره انه صرنا في وضعيه حرب وحولنا كل المطاعم ل distribution center.
You're so lovely.
You're welcome. Chicken. Girls, are you all done here?
The contrast between the craziness and humour of lockdown life and the desperate tragedy of COVID-19 was captured in A Day in the Life of Coronavirus Britain.
We're going to do another case in theatre. In our COVID theatres that you can see behind me, they're all sealed off. We have to keep all the equipment outside. Got my intubation and PPE kit.
Just take a nice deep breath in and a deep breath out. In and out. In and out.
Feels like we're at the start of something that's going to be around for a while, so the challenge continues and we'll keep going.
Eric Morris lives in rural Alabama. He never leaves the house without a gun, but not for the reason you might think. African-American Eric is a hunter and a champion of diversity in outdoor pursuits. Hunt country.
Okay. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Old Faithful. Never let me down. This is one of my favorite shotguns. I have about 11 of them. I'm hoping to put it to use this morning on the deer. See a squirrel. Not bad. Not bad. I wanted more than one. I wanted a deer, but those squirrels are delicious. So this one will be fried up. If I get some more with it, I will probably make some stew.
NZ Wars, Stories of Waitara, brings to life the important history of an indigenous Maori tribe in its battles with the colonizing forces of the British Empire.
She goes up to Teringanu and she lights fire. And it's the smoke signals that let Taranaki people know that there's a cry of need on this side.
Well, that is a story that really resonates with me. Waitara, relatively speaking, is not far from where I grew up in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And this was another closely fought category, and the judges asked for 2 commendations. Firstly, for brilliant investigative journalism and sensitive handling of a delicate issue, In the Name of the State by Antenna 3. And for the courage and skills shown by local journalists covering a taboo subject, Afghanistan's Open Secret, Stigma and Shame of Child Sex Abuse by BBC News Persian. And the winner of the Domestic Affairs Documentary Award this year goes to a programme that the judges said demonstrated strong research and outstanding reporting. Spotlight on the Troubles, A Secret History by BBC Northern Ireland. Chris Thornton is the Spotlight producer at BBC Northern Ireland. Chris, talk us through the biggest challenges in telling a story that covers 30 years of conflict.
We realized right away that we couldn't be comprehensive about the entirety of the conflict. I mean, as it was, what was intended to be 6 hours of television turned into 9. So the challenge was to tell the story as wholly as we could, but also as fairly and sensitively as we could. Because for people that lost their mother, their father, their brother or sister, you know, what was the most important event of their life was either going to be ignored by us or told in 30 seconds. So that's one reason we felt it was important to put the death toll on screen, to constantly remind the viewer that while the particular event that we're focusing on was happening, people were still dying.
The Troubles ended in 1998. There are people now in their 20s who were born after the Good Friday Agreement. What's their reaction been to the programme?
One of the most gratifying things has been the reaction of young people who told us that they learned something from the series. We've also we've heard from parents that their children have told them that they understood better about what the parents went through, or they understand the parents' motivations better and why they kept their children close to home, kept them in at night, not that kind of thing. But one of the most important reactions among young people is that they said that we've learned about events and about things that happened that were often just too painful to talk about at home.
Our search for News Agency of the Year 2020 has been narrowed down to 2 finalists. The first finalist is AFP.
The message I wanted to say and to give was, how dare you? Because I have all these world leaders in front of me, and this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually address those world leaders.
Our second nominee is Ruptly.
We try to find stories before they become stories. For example, we were the first agency to do live coverage of the Black Lives Matter movement back during the Ferguson protests. And we have followed the story all the way through the recent global protests that followed the killing of George Floyd.
The agency also obtained rare footage from its Tehran bureau of the wreckage of Ukrainian Airlines Flight 752, which the Iranians wrongly downed at the height of the crisis.
Our reporter was one of the first journalists to reach the crash site to film the wreckage, and more importantly, was one of only a few reporters who filmed the removal of the wreckage in the following days.
But as well as hard news, its output increasingly features lighter content. Offbeat, funny or touching stories that generate huge numbers of views across social media. It focuses on human interest stories and giving voice to the voiceless.
None of us in the live news business could exist without agencies to help us. This new AIB award goes some way to highlighting their invaluable work. And the winner of the AIB News Agency of the Year 2020 is AFP, Phil Chetwynd is Global News Director of AFP in Paris. Phil, very many congratulations to you. What have been the greatest challenges for news agencies this year?
I think the biggest challenge of the pandemic has been working out how to work remotely and safely in an environment that literally has been shifting every single day. We've been forced to be agile, creative, and to constantly build on our shared experiences. Our team, which was on the ground in the Chinese city of Wuhan back in January, played a key role in building safe protocols about how we can work in a time of COVID-19. And this work done on the ground has then been shared with our teams around the world and constantly updated. And it's meant that we have been able throughout the year to continue to do our job, to be on the ground, to tell these important human stories safely.
Give us a flavour of how advances in technology are helping change the way that you look to deliver stories.
The use of mobile technology in live production has allowed us to work in much safer and more immersive way in dangerous situations. In the wave of protests that gripped the planet over the past year, from France to Hong Kong, Chile, and Black Lives Matter in the United States, our teams have been able to blend into the crowd and capture images that we would have struggled to get in the past. I think in the coverage of the pandemic, we have seen how the drone has really just become a standard part of our toolkit. The images of, for example, deserted cities across the world and mass burials in places such as Brazil and Indonesia were really some of the most iconic images of the pandemic that we captured in this way.
Congratulations to the AFP team in Paris and around the world. And congratulations to all the winners we've announced so far in the AIBs 2020. For now, let me hand over to Simon Spanswick in Westminster.
Thanks, Kim. Each year at the AIBs, we like to delve further into one of the programmes that has been put forward by programme makers around the world. We want to meet the people involved, we want to discover more about the story and why it was made. This year, I'm delighted to be able to welcome Waad al-Kateab, a Syrian filmmaker whose programme For Sama has been shortlisted in our International Affairs category.
جيت بس ننزل بسرعة. ممكن. تمام عمين مرحبا. تمام.
Waad, welcome to the AIBs.
Thank you so much.
Now, For Sama is an incredibly powerful story that tells viewers about the siege of Aleppo in a way that pretty much hasn't been seen before. How did it come about?
So there was no plan for this. I think it was kind of like different from what people know about Syria. I've been filming in Syria for 5 years since the revolution started. I'm an activist, I'm a mother, a woman who's living that situation, and I was at the same time trying to document everything was happening around. For this, there was no plan what to film and what not to film, how to take a distance from what's happening, because I was living through that. And I found everything was happening through this 5 years. And then after the displacement in 2016, I was out of Aleppo. And when I came here to London for the first time, it was February 2017 with Channel 4 News, who I worked before with as a news reporter. And we just had normal conversation about, I want to do something bigger, more than just a report of 5 minutes. Channel 4 News were also interested to do more beyond this, behind the scenes and beyond what they just seen in some reports. And then it was a conversation of let's see, what do you have? And I brought for them 12 hard drives, and we were just kind of watching all together and seeing that there's something much, much bigger than what we expected. And for 2 years we've been working on this, me and my co-director Edward Watts. And it was just an amazing journey for me, as much as it was hard at the same time to relive all of this.
When you first went to Aleppo to take up a course at the university, did you expect that life would take this turn?
I hated Aleppo a lot before, and I didn't want to go to that university specifically. Aleppo is a very tough city. I was feeling that I don't have any belong to all of Syria. I mean, all of us, since we were born, we were taught to learn that Assad will stay forever. There's no like freedom in our country. There's like we were putting ourselves in this like box as prisons. And most of my generation, not just me or like even Hamza, who I met later, we were all planning to finish our to graduate, finish our university, and then go out of Syria to continue our life, do whatever we want. And then when the Syrian revolution started, I was at the fourth year of my university, and that's when everything like totally changed. It was the first time when I felt that I had a stake in my country. I'm able to change something. I'm able to be part of this community. Everyone who living in that circumstances, it was a hope of change. It was the first time we feel like we are able to have a life, a real life. And that's when I felt like, no, I have to be here. I have to be here to the end, because this is the only chance for us to do something.
The scenes that you've captured within the film are quite extraordinary for anybody that hasn't lived through the situation with bombs falling, warplanes going overhead. When you were recording all this, what was going through your head? Because you saw some extraordinary things that people really shouldn't have to see.
It's not like something that people should see or should not see. It's about things should not even happen in this world. And when we look back to the history, and so many like big events happened similar to this, we were like looking about how savage these people or how like strange at this situation. But we're living now in this world where this is even still happening as we now standing here talking. And I mean, I wasn't really thinking about what does that mean. We were just living through that a minute by a minute, driven by the whole like opportunity that this is the only change and this is the only way for us to make a change. And we knew how much like sacrifice is happening around. We knew how much risk we are putting ourselves in, but you have no other like choice but to fight, but to keep going, but to help other people, but to even help yourself to keep going in that situation. And the camera for me was the only way to do this. That was my participation in the revolution for these people, for the only hope maybe for us all that some way and somehow like some people or some governments will see this and they will see like, you know, should not happen.
There are moments of extreme poignancy in the film, but there's also quite a lot of happiness. You met Hamza, you got married, and you gave birth to Sama. It's difficult for somebody looking at this to understand those huge range of emotions that you must have gone through. Take us through some of that, and about falling in love and getting married in these extraordinary conditions.
I mean, in that circumstance, there's so much like unique and different like perspectives and even emotional or relationship between even people, not just between me and Hamza, but you can see that also like through Afra and Salim, their kids, everyone around, like there was something of a one community. And I think people here now started to understand this after the COVID-19 and how people, although like we start to be scared from each other because of the pandemic, but at the same time how much we started to be close to each other. I think there are so many things how human beings are able to cope with any circumstances, like falling in love or finding a moment of happiness or like to laugh about something maybe we're so scared of. I think that's the moment that make us survive at the end. And that was so important in the film because this is the reflection of the true experience which people can live. And I think through like releasing the film in so many countries, I met people like in Sarajevo or in Ireland who like, it wasn't something like very far away from what they remember. And they felt like this was our life at the same time. And that's what I felt like. It's not just Syria, you know, it's any human being who's putting like a risk in some place where sometimes you want to even escape or you don't want to escape, you want to fight or you don't want to fight, but there is something you have to do as a basic things to survive.
Tell us about the hospital that was set up. How do you go about setting up a hospital in what is essentially a war zone with no support from the authorities?
Not just from no support from authorities, but from like attempting so hardly to like destroy this place and kill everyone there and attack it, like you've seen that in the film. I mean, I think that was also like part of the normal situation that people want to live or part of the fight because people want to continue their life and they want to stand against what was happening. You've seen maybe in the film like two old men were playing chess in the street. I mean, all of these like moments were kind of like part of the fight and people want this, people need this because that's their life, that's their country. And I think the hospital, in one way or another, that was like small home or small country that we were dreaming of after like the revolution of having free Syria, where everyone is just like collaboration with each other, trying like to find their part, trying to help in any way they can, and try even like to set up this very simple and basic rights of like freedom or dignity or like justice through this small like system where people can live together and do their best to survive.
You've talked about justice. Do you think justice will ever come to Syria?
I mean, I believe this, and if I don't believe that justice will ever like come to Syria or to us, I will never be standing here talking about the story. I really believe that, and I believe also that nothing will last forever, and it doesn't matter how long it will take, but it will take everything we can do to reach that point one day. For Sama is just one step of this like long way of justice. We are trying also to work on Action for Sama, which is the impact campaign around the film, to try to like seek for more accountability for Syria. We have a law case against Russia and the Syrian regime about attacking hospital, and specifically the attack that you've seen through the film. And we're trying everything we can, and we just like maybe 5 or 6 people, but there's so many other Syrians who are working in amazing and very like different sectors where we try all together like to bring that one day and keep that dream forever.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a bit more about Action for Sama, because that's a campaign, as you say, around the film. What impact has it had so far?
I mean, for 2 years, while I was working with Edward on the film, we've been told a lot about like no one will come to watch another Syrian film. This is like people are so bored about Syria, it's not anymore like important, and don't put any high expectation about this. And we quite like believed this, and when the film was out, we were both like, and I think everyone who worked on the film shocked about how many people like wants to see the film, wants to do more. And in every screening there was some people who coming to us and asking us like, what can we do? And for me that question was literally like the feeling that I did something, and I did something really important.
What does life hold for you now? You're here in the UK, you were granted asylum a few years ago. You've got Hamza with you, you've got your 2 children. You're working for Channel 4 News. Tell us about that and what your aspirations are for your own career. Now you're a recognized filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, it's so complicated because so far with everything that's happening, I'm not able even to process this. But for me, like Channel 4 News was the place where I saw the light when I was inside Aleppo besieged, and I know that there was someone behind me who was like working every day to make this footage like coming out. So it was even very emotional for me to be back again and be working in the office, which I've never like even imagined to see. And in this place also, like I'm trying to play my part as journalist in this country. And like I did some reports about hospitals when the pandemic was like hit in the first lockdown. I went also to Moria to cover the refugees there. So I'm trying to do stories as much as I can about refugee, about life, about human being. And in any way, like I learned so much from that experience, and I really want to be useful from this. At the same time, I feel like I have a different things what people can see here. And I think that this is very important perspective to show like the whole world into that experience. I live in London, and I really like living here. And I hope just like to be one day back to Syria, and I will keep doing everything I'm doing just to gain that day.
If you had one message for the journalists, editors, commissioners, producers who are watching this now, what would it be?
I want to like really be useful from what I learned through Action for Sama and through For Sama about like having that perspective of the people, of the story who you are trying to tell, more than our own perspective as journalists. And I mean, I understand also how neutrality like works in this like journalism and like media work, but at the same time, personal stories who are really matters, stories who can change something. That's the most important thing. And as much as you can like to bring people perspective out more than ours, that's I think the most important thing in the whole like industry. And also like for something like Syria or so many other countries, like feeling so much like go deeply into what's happening, not just like what general things has happened. Don't call like something like the Syrian revolution a civil war, because you are not just trying to be neutral, but you are misunderstand and misinform the audience about what's happening.
Waad al-Kateab, Thank you for sharing Forsama with us. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your story with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
A fascinating story and an exceptionally brave woman. Thanks to Waad al-Kateab and Simon Spanswick in Westminster. And we're now halfway through our very busy 2020 awards. Congratulations to all of the winners so far in this year's AIBs. And there is plenty more to come in the competition. There's our Science, Natural World, Arts, Investigative and International Affairs Documentary Awards. We'll also be announcing our winner of the Young Journalist and Channel of the Year Awards. So there really is still lots to see in the second part of the AIBs 2020, which will be released on Monday the 16th of November at 1500 GMT. I do hope you'll join me and be able to see more of the world's best journalism and factual productions. Until then, keep well and goodbye.